G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're breaking from the usual format and speaking with a subject matter expert on mental health in the workplace. I'm interviewing Bianca Welsh from a business called From Experience Community based in Launceston, Australia. Thanks for your time today, Bianca.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with how we know each other. I think I actually met your husband, James, when I moved to Tasmania about 10 years ago, because yourself and Rod and Kim and Craig had started the Black Cow, beautiful restaurant there in Launceston in 2008. And James, one of the owners and also the sommelier at both Black Cow and Stillwater. So I think we ran into each other at many of the occasions of me dining there. Yeah,
fantastic. Yes, we go back quite a way.
And I've had, we do. And I've had Rod, who's the founder in the 80s of Stillwater and one of the co-founders of the Black Cow with you guys on the cast. He was episode number 7. And Craig Will, another business partner with you guys and the executive chef for both restaurants. He was episode 118 for those that want to go back and have a listen. Tell us a little bit about your background and experience.
So I'm a Lonnie girl. I'm adopted from South Korea. Ended up in Launceston when I was 5 months old. Proudly public schooled in northern suburbs, which those that are in Tassie know that they're generally the rougher parts of Launceston. But I wear that with pride, and I like to push stereotypes and break stigmas. So ended up sort of working in fast food during my college days, and I really enjoyed the pace. I worked at McDonald's, and I absolutely loved my experience there, and I'm still in touch with all of my colleagues from back then. And that was a really good base for my journey into hospitality. So I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do after college. I worked hard at getting a good score in case I wanted to go to uni, but for me, it wasn't on the cards. I wanted to go into a management role, and to me, to learn that on the job was more important than from paper. So I decided to enroll in Drysdale, which is the Tasmanian hospitality school at TAFE, and worked through a diploma of hospitality management. So through my work experience during that course, I found that what I was going to pursue was hotel work. I thought I wanted to go and become a GM of a large chain of hotels. I began work experience in the reception, and I realized that it just wasn't for me. It wasn't my pace, and I wasn't enjoying it. But simultaneously, I was also doing work experience in a hotel restaurant, and I just fell in love with the atmosphere, and I love the connection you can make with a person and with a table. I like that there's a start, a middle, and an end. You get to go through their whole journey of dining, rather than with reception work, you sort of see them on check-in and then that's it. You might not see them on checkout because that's not your shift. So I didn't like I didn't like the lack of continuity with that. And so I just kept pursuing the career in hospitality. I worked as a casual waiter, worked in a cellar door, providor. I did a little bit of retail to check that out as well. And then I ended up as a casual waiter at Stillwater and worked my way up into a management role there. I was then offered to go into a brand new venture, which at the time was Black Cow. So I'd been with Stillwater for about a couple of years, and to go in there as a small partner, and jumped at the chance with now my husband, James. And then a couple of years later, so that was back in 2008 and I was 21. And then a couple of years later, we bought into Stillwater when a couple of the founders and previous business partners retired. So in 2010, we were suddenly responsible for about 65 staff instead of about a dozen we had at Black Cow when we began.
Yep. And about 2 years ago, you also added Stillwater 7, the accommodation as well, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. So in 2014, the Providore, which was located above Stillwater, we've got an amazing building here. It's a 3-story flour mill, old flour mill built in the 1830s. And the opportunity came up for this business that Stillwater had never had control of. It was a separately run and business started up by a Launceston couple back in 2001, and it had gone through a series of different business owners until we bought it in 2014. So we ran it as a Providore and gallery for almost 4 years to the day, and then saw an opportunity to turn the space and better utilize the space, because sort of retail, I guess, food retail was kind of dying a slow death. And, there's a lot of competition now and can't really compete with the big supermarkets. Their ranges are so much better than they were back in the day. And so we saw the opportunity to turn the space into boutique accommodations. Now we've got seven luxurious rooms overlooking Kanamaluka, River Tamar.
Yep.
And that's been really successful, although we celebrated our first year anniversary in COVID, and it's been obviously challenging since then. But we're still filling rooms, and we're still getting really great feedback.
Yeah, the rooms are magnificent. I've had a look through them when I was up there once. I had Kylie Scott from Cumulus, actually, the architectural design studio that designed those rooms for you. She was on Cast 25, and their work's always great.
Yes, yeah. Cumulus do some amazing work around the state.
So you've been involved with businesses with a lot of team members. So obviously you have a lot of war stories and experiences from not just managing people, but people's issues that they carry with them into the workplace, inside and outside of work. So perhaps outline for the audience what is good and bad mental health in the workplace, and speak a little bit about each.
So I guess what I possibly left out of that journey was my journey into mental health and psychology. So managing people obviously can be fraught with a lot of dangers. And in that first year of owning Stillwater, and now suddenly being responsible for a lot more people, I was faced with some really challenging situations to do with mental illness and poor mental health. And I felt very ill-equipped, and I really wanted to know more. So I decided to enroll in a degree at UTAS in psychology. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even discuss it with James. I just enrolled and hoped that I'd get in. And then I got in. And had you asked me when I was back in school, like in college, I did all the units other than psychology. I had no idea what psychology even meant. But I was really keen to understand more, to be the best manager that I could be, because I knew that these things, the prevalence of it, were not going to wane. It was going to increase. And if I wanted to have a successful business and healthy teams, I just knew I wanted to be more aware of how the brain works. And thought I'd just I enjoy studying. I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I wanted to know more. So yeah, I guess I've witnessed before poor mental health in plenty of hospitality workplaces. I mean, I've worked in numerous other places before coming to Stillwater and Black Cow, and I've obviously seen different shifts in our culture and over time. And it can be really toxic when mental health is not recognised as being a real issue. It can be from poor language around it, those typical phrases that we still hear, unfortunately, toughen up or get over it. That sort of stuff is still around. But I guess by implementing a mentally healthy workplace and really working on being proactive in the mental health space has seen us, we truly believe, to be where it attributed to our success, particularly in retention and attraction of staff. We are seen as leaders in the industry. In kind of, we aim to be leaders in everything we do, in terms of produce and relationships with suppliers and practices like good accounting practices and all that sort of stuff. But particularly leaders in mental health, and recognizing that by investing time and energy in it, the return on investment is far outweighs the effort. It takes time, but just by changing your language and being more empathetic is some examples of good mental health in the workplace. And I think a lot of employers out there, big and small, think that this area is just resigned to the HR department. This is actually a business case for the entire workplace and for any workplace in any industry. And that by spending some time on it, you can definitely make your business more successful.
Yeah, maybe talk to some of the numbers, because you spoke at our Northern meetup about a month ago, and I was floored with some of the numbers you presented there about that business case. Do you remember some of those numbers?
Yeah, so turnover of an operational team member in the accommodation sector, so we're talking housekeeper, waiter, entry-level sort of job, is a $10,000 cost per person. And that's huge. And our industry average for turnover is 80%, which is one of the worst across industries in Australia.
And what, sorry, 80% per annum? Or
per annum.
On average?
Yep, wow. On average, yep. It's horrific. And we proudly sit at about 10% if I remove those that move for various reasons that they need to move because spouses get jobs elsewhere or they finish their degrees. But yeah, the stats are horrifying. If you can say, like, margins are tiny in hospitality, and margins I know are getting slimmer in all industries. The cost of goods, the cost of labor, all the things, insurance, everything is costing more and more and more. Like our licensing fees to play music in the restaurant goes up every year. So to be able to save $10,000 for one person, that's huge to the bottom line. So that was a Griffith University study, and that was done in 2010. The study that was comparable to that wasn't done with the last time it was done that was comparable was about 1996. Right. So some really good stats to work with. The fiscal return on investment that headsup.org.au have researched is if for every $1 you spend on mental health in the workplace, you get $2.30 back. Right. And again, that's a great return on investment. The stats over, I think we really need to look at more, and why in our industry. We're all facing skills shortage. We're all facing labour force shortage across so many industries, but particularly for tourism and hospitality, as well as for us in a state that relies on tourism and hospitality. We are one of the largest employers across sectors. We really need to ensure that we've got a steady stream of people wanting to work in our industry. And by wanting to work in our industry, we need to have mentally healthy workplaces. It's all so connected, but a lot of people just think that this stuff is, like I mentioned before, resigned to one department. It needs to be from the top down to the bottom. The top, the fish rots from the head down. The leaders in any workplace, big or small, could be a 2-person workplace to 150 more. It needs to come from the top, this philosophy.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think a lot of business owners don't realise this business case or the impact, or some simple things that you can put in place to make the workplace safer and more efficient and productive around this. So yeah, and also society in general is recognising, as we touched on earlier, that mental health is a real thing and needs to be managed and proactively, worked on.
That's right. I'd love to see a day where we compare. Often I've become a mental health first aid instructor, and there's a part in the course where you compare and you do an exercise with your cohort of comparing physical disabilities with the mental illness. And in that, schizophrenia is attributed to being equivalent in the disability score to quadriplegia.
Wow. Right.
And that's huge. Severe depression is compared to disseminated cancer. So that's like stage 5 cancer.
Wow.
But it should be that we don't need to compare. We understand that a lot of mental illness is not by choice, and poor mental health can also be not by choice. But there are things that we can do and education that we can do in our schools, but particularly in our workplaces, that can help people get on the right track to be proactive about their mental health. For us in our industry, in tourism and hospitality, we largely employ 16 to 25-year-olds. That is the most common age of onset for a mental illness. 50% of people will experience a mental illness by the time that they're in that age group.
Wow.
So if we're able to, as employers, identify and know what symptoms we should be looking out for, and to guide people into the right resources. If someone in your workplace complained of a bad back, you'd say, hey, why don't you go to the chiropractor or an osteo, or go see your GP? It's the same as if you're not sleeping, if you're feeling low, you've got feelings of self-worth, you're not feeling yourself, you're doubting yourself, you're not able to do your job, you're struggling to get out of bed. It's the same stuff. You need to know where to guide people as to how to get that help.
Yeah, I think you mentioned in your talk that suicide's the biggest killer of Australians under the age of 40, isn't it?
Yeah, 44. It is still the leading cause of death in Australia.
Wow.
The numbers are not getting better. They're obviously getting worse, particularly in COVID. I think the stats, in Victoria, they're horrific. The teen suicide is horrific in Victoria at the moment. Obviously, all those lockdowns are not helping the case, and access to professional services. There's a lot that needs to be fixed in the mental health ecosystem. And the access to psychologists and professionals is difficult. The process to become psychologists, clinical psychologists, to become professionals in the field is difficult. But if we can help in that early intervention and prevention, which is the Productivity Commission did a report into mental health. That is the largest part that we can improve on in our country, is early intervention and prevention. Mm-hmm. So we need to be looking at ways of doing that. And I truly believe that our workplaces are a huge key to improving the overall mental health of Australia.
I totally agree. And do you have some examples of how powerful mental health in the workplace can be for business?
Well, I guess our basic stat of our retention, I guess some basic case studies of our workplace is by guiding people to the right supports. I emphasize, and we emphasize when we're training in mental health first aid, that it is not your role to be the diagnoser. You're not the professional. You're not the doctor. There's only a small cohort of people that can technically make a diagnosis. That is a GP, a medical doctor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist. No one else is really technically allowed to diagnose. So we aren't to be people's doctors, counsellors, psychologists. We are just there to be a guide. And when we've been able to guide someone to how to get the right help, what you need to go to the GP and talk about. So you go not just discussing your physical symptoms, but also your mood, your thoughts and emotions. And to have a conversation with the GP about that stuff. People go, oh, I never realized that I could have a conversation about that with my GP. I thought it would just be all physical stuff. Yeah. But that GP then is able to make a diagnosis, make a mental health plan for you, which means you get a certain amount of Medicare covered psychologist appointments.
Used to be 10 a year. After COVID, they doubled it to 20 a year.
That's correct, which is a fantastic outcome.
You can go and see a psychologist or a therapist, someone for, I think it's like $30 or $40 a session. People don't realize how affordable it can be.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah, the gap is, I remind people, the gap is about a bottle of wine for people in that industry, because we're more than happy to go and spend money on booze and food instead of on our mental health. So, letting people know what that cost is, how you get that help. We've been able to have amazing outcomes in terms of performance. So, and our productivity. So by me having a conversation with someone as a person to person, removing that employer hat, obviously it is ultimately for the workplace, but if you come from a genuine place of care and that you want to help this person be better and feel better, all that awkwardness will go away. I think a lot of employers and people get really scared of having these conversations, that they're going to say the wrong thing, they're going to cross a line.
Yep.
95% of the time, probably more, 99% of the time, you can't always get it right. There's going to be people that you don't connect with on the right level, and they don't understand what you're trying to achieve, and that is trying to help them. But if you are just coming from a place of care, you can make mistakes. You're allowed to. You're only human as well. You can say some wrong things. You just need to explain, like, oh, sorry, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable or awkward. Like, I just want to help you. It will never fall in the wrong place, and that person will understand that you're just trying to help them. And so by me or even Craig's become really good at this sort of stuff as well. Just by having a conversation to say, look, how are you? And I've noticed X, Y, Z in your behavior, or X, Y, Z in your performance. Is there anything I can help with, or what can we do in the workplace, or what's going on in your life? And it might be the first opportunity that person has had to tell someone how they're actually feeling. You're probably the first person that's actually noticed in their life.
Yep.
When you work alongside people, we all know that we probably spend most of our time with our work colleagues than our family and friends.
Yep.
And we see them in a very exposed way, because when you're doing tasks, and I guess sometimes banal things, you can pick up on people's traits and moods and emotions a lot better than you can when you're at home and you're just doing housework, or you're just, hanging around the house. You can't really tell in those sort of environments as much as you can at work. And by someone noticing that something's not right, that person can go, oh wow, like, I've been seen, I have an opportunity to be heard. And to get it out and to talk things through, it's probably their first opportunity that they've had to actually think and talk about this sort of stuff.
Yep.
And by doing that, when we link a performance issue to that, it's either poor mental health, or either an undiagnosed mental illness, or perhaps a mental illness that's not being managed to the best of their ability.
Yep.
We've been able to fix and improve those performance issues, improve that person's quality of life. They've been able to get help, feel better, function better in all different ways, not just at work. We've had so many people come back to us either while they're still currently working for us or afterwards, and say, I've been able to do X, Y, Z. I've been able to address that I have not been able to for decades. And then by that, by them being more comfortable in their own skin, being able to sort through their thoughts and emotions and moods, they can engage with the customer better, they can work with their team members better, they can communicate better, you can think better, you can problem solve better, you can do all those things better. You end up with a better employee and a happier person. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why in my weekly one-on-ones that I have with any full-time team member when I'm managing a business, the first question I ask them is, how are you going? It's an open question for a specific reason. They could be under a lot of pressure at work. They want to talk about projects or shit that's going wrong at work. And sometimes it's just that opportunity for them to go, I'm having a really hard time at home, or, I'm struggling with my mental health, etc. So it's a really good question to start your one-on-ones with.
Absolutely. And there's a great UK campaign that they did, Ask Twice. So often when you do face that question and you're asked that question, we're very, particularly I think in Australian culture, we're always like, oh yeah, I'm good, like I'm fine.
Yep.
But by asking that again, you can know, but how are you really? We'll sort of crack the surface a little bit better.
And in your talk at the meetup a month or so ago, you shared a personal experience as a manager. You identified one of your team members, their behavior and performance had really dropped. Can you maybe talk to that for a moment for the audience to understand what that was all about and what the outcome was?
So I had a really great waiter, casual, one of those 110% employees that were A grade.
Yeah.
Oh, they're you want to clone them, that they're so good. And then suddenly their behavior began to change and they became unreliable. They became distracted. They were disengaged. They were kind of disappearing, going AWOL in the middle of a shift. And it became apparent to us that this person was actually suffering from an eating disorder, and the binging and purging was happening on shift. It really affected the team around this person. They were quite uncomfortable and upset about what to do, and they wanted to help, but they didn't know how, and neither did I. And knowing that, because it was happening in the workplace and on shift, I knew I needed to step in and do something. And I didn't want to do what normally happens in hospitality, and because they're casual, you just sort of cut their shifts back and you sort of say,
manage them out.
Kind of no more, there's no more work. Yeah. And I just didn't want to do that, because this person was obviously very capable. Something was going on in their life that had triggered this behavior, and I wanted to help. So, I Googled what I could and I couldn't find it. This was back in like 2011. I didn't know what to do. I had no resources back then of where to turn. So I just ended up having a really basic conversation with this person to say, how are you? Is everything okay? They were in denial at that point, and so they sort of denied that anything was going on. I kind of danced around what behaviours we had witnessed, but kind of said we'd witnessed X, Y, Z, particularly more talking about their performance, but kind of alluded to that something else was going on and we were concerned about that behaviour. And again, a little bit of denial. They went away and they were on a split shift on this day. And side note, I recommend don't do that. Do it on a day when they're not working.
Yeah.
Having that chat.
So they didn't turn up the second shift?
No, they called in sick for the second shift, and I thought, oh my God, I've really stuffed this up. I'm made it worse. They're not going to come back, or they're going to come back and they're just going to revert to the same behaviour and they're not going to get any help. Fortunately, the next day I received a really long text message from this person saying, thank you for having that conversation with me. I've been in complete denial. It was something that was going on. It's something happening in my personal life. I'm under a bit of stress at home, and I had suffered from this condition when I was a teenager, when I was younger, and it's come back because of the stress I'm going through. So I'm booked in to see my doctor. They went to their doctor's appointment. They got the help. They got back on track, and they stayed with us for like almost another year. They went back to their 110% perfect employee behaviour. And then they actually, when they finished, they went off to uni and they became a medical doctor themselves. Wow. And that was just a really great example of how you don't need to be the person that fixes it. You don't need to take on that responsibility as the employer. And through my experience, and we've supported people that have been through, obviously depression and anxiety are the most common, but bipolar, substance misuse, substance addiction, grief, trauma, rape, suicide, sexual assault, psychosis. We've had a chef in psychosis before. It's been, we've witnessed and supported and retained all of those people, and retained them being able to continue to work to some capacity that they're comfortable with and that we're comfortable with to still run a business. And you often think that when there's a performance issue, or when there is an issue, you think that it is related to the workplace, that they're not happy, something's wrong with the workplace, they don't like someone, they don't like the way you do things. 95% of the time, it has got nothing to do with the workplace. It's actually something that is external. And if you can help guide them to those right resources, and know that workplace is a safe place for them to come and be. And I almost, particularly those that are perhaps on the wheel of depression and anxiety, that work can be almost part of their therapy, that they can come to work and kind of switch off, just concentrate on service, almost give their mind a break from all of those thoughts they've got rolling around in their head constantly. And it's same with like uni students when you at uni and you sort of think, oh, I need to spend every minute of every day studying and doing this assignment, blah, blah, blah. But it's when you actually take a break and you go back, you can go back with fresh eyes. You've had a little bit of a mental break. You're better. You're working at a better capacity to complete the task. So I sort of try and work individually, one-on-one, case by case with people as to how they can continue coming to work, feel comfortable, feel safe, feel capable to do their job to a capacity that we're all comfortable with. That's the customer, that's the workplace, that's our expectations. We hold high expectations, and we've got I guess a reputation for being known for good service, good food, and we like to uphold that best as we can. So we've definitely got a job to be done, but we want to do that in a way that people can come and just be what they are going through in a supportive way. Because if someone came in with a physical ailment, they've got a sprained ankle, they've got a broken arm, you would help them, you would acknowledge it, you would alter their work, their position to fit that. So why can't we do that for a mental illness or poor mental health? Because the aim is that it's not forever. I think that is another thing that people feel as though that once you've sort of got a mental health issue, that's it. You're not going to sort of get off the bus, and you can with support and guidance. And I think work can be a really positive part of people's recovery.
Yeah. And as a business owner and manager in that situation you just spoke of, I think you said in your talk, it took you something like 6 weeks to get the courage up to talk with this team member about this issue. And like you Google, you tried to find resources. So I do think it's a really under-resourced area in management and as a business owner. But really important to act.
That's right. And the information out there and the resources out there are so much better these days. There's heaps of places to turn to. There's heaps of helplines that you've got access to. There's heaps of information online. But just by having a conversation with them and trying to work through how you can help them together is not a bad way to do it either. You might be completely clueless, but you just want to help. And
maybe we'll talk a little bit about, from your experience as an owner and a manager in the business recently, you've now set up another organisation called From Experience to really help workplaces. Maybe just touch on that for a bit, and we'll link through to the website as well.
Yeah, sure. So we, through COVID, obviously, things changed dramatically in the way we were running the restaurant. And sort of through that takeaway phase, we were just doing takeaway coffee in the morning and then dinner takeaway service at night. So I had a lot of time in between. I think a lot of business owners and managers out there would certainly attribute that when that first lockdown, the first time COVID hit Australia, I don't think we've ever worked harder or more hours than we ever did. But it was a different time and a different type of work. So I had a lot of time where I was actually by myself in the restaurant, where there was no one else around. There was no customers, there was no staff. I was just getting things ready for takeaway service. And it got me thinking, right, how can I use this degree to help others? Like, mental health is not going away. Mental health is going to become worse because of COVID. And our industry is going to really hurt from what we are going through and what we will go through. And unfortunately, we're continuing to go through across the country. And so I graduated in 2018 and really wanted to find a way to share my knowledge with other employers and to better the industry in general, particularly hospitality and tourism, because we are viewed as one of the worst industries to work in. We talk about the negatives so much, about poor working hours, poor pay, poor conditions. And it does have a really great side to it. There's a really great, there are really good parts to it. So how can we be better at talking about those things as well? And so I landed on I actually approached the Tasmanian Hospitality Association and said I wanted to do a program. I don't know what that looked like really at the time, but I was thinking, is it sort of coaching or mentoring? We landed on a peer-to-peer model. And so at the moment, I'm offering a peer-to-peer service where that is talking with business owners, managers, whoever the leader is in a business, in the industry, and really tailoring what they need, because a lot of people's journey on mental health in the workplace is at very different levels and stages, and their understanding of mental health and illness is at very different stages. So I've had clients that are just needing really broad information on what to implement and how to implement that in the workplace. I obviously resource really professional places like headsup.org. I've spoken about that already, has got some really great resources of how to be a mentally healthy workplace. And this is all obviously based on research. So I'm very big on, obviously through my degree, being a psych student, you get very, you get deep into the importance of research and that critical thinking and understanding what is the best practice and what is the most researched and the best research out there. So definitely tying in that academic and research information with practical. And that's what I loved about studying while I was simultaneously running businesses. I loved that I could apply all of these things that I was learning about and apply it into a practical sense and into a workplace. And I could almost test out these things and almost experiment almost on my team while I was learning all of this stuff. And I really wanted to share the positives and the successes of some of those practices and some of that understanding to other employers. As a time poor employer, particularly in industry, we are often always operational as well as working on the business. So you can often deprioritize this as being having any time for this sort of stuff. And where do you start? What information is going to be useful and practical? So I want to be able to distill that and dissect that into a bite-sized, manageable amount of information that people can start their mental health journey. And that's the thing, it's a journey. I'm constantly learning. I still love reading and listening to TED Talks and podcasts and books. Like I just adore buying books about psychology and self-help and all the sorts of things and readings, and it will never end because the research is getting better. People are changing, like the world is changing at such a rapid pace that I'm hoping that I can help be the conduit to people wanting to implement these things in the workplace, break it down as a business owner myself and continuing business owner myself, that these things do work and how we can better the industry from inside out.
Yeah, I think that's a fabulous service that you're helping business owners, managers particularly, to skill up on. I mean, from my experience, 22 years now in small business, 26 different business partners, 13 businesses in 3 countries. I've seen a shit ton of good and bad mental health in the workplace.
Yeah.
From team members up to fellow business owners and business partners as well. So, I've seen pits of insecurity, depression, anxiety, work addiction, including myself, obsession with achieving and earning more, burnout, exhaustion. I certainly suffered those. I had at least one business partner have a nervous breakdown or a mental breakdown that was challenging. And after a couple of big life moments, myself went through a shit ton of mental health stuff with, my mother dying and divorce and stuff like that. So having the support around you to make sure that you can get through all that and stay in the workplace, whether you're an employee or an owner, is, very, very needed.
I think it's really important for those leaders to have a place where they can vent themselves, where they can connect with someone who understands completely what they might be going through or what the industry is actually like to work in and what challenges they face. We all say it's lonely at the top, we're a really great community in Tasmania. We're a small community, but we can be very reluctant to actually talk to each other about what we're really going through, kind of that tall poppy sort of thing, or oversharing, or we're scared or we fear what someone else will think if we're going through a tough time. And obviously through my personal experiences as well, which I've talked publicly about, my wonderful husband James, he's had his huge battle and journey with mental health and illness. And by also coming from that carer's role, I think I can provide a lot of support and I guess comfort to understand what people are going through. I've fortunately myself not really suffered from mental illness. I've certainly had parts in my life where I've had particularly stressful moments and tough times, but I'm not to the point of having been clinically diagnosed, but I've definitely lived with someone really suffering severe depression and severe anxiety and suicidal thoughts and ideation, and understanding what that's like from a personal perspective as well as a professional perspective. And I guess through James's experience, through so many different treatments, countless different medications, and also my ability to understand that from a psych student's perspective, to know what all those medications are doing and why they're used and what they're used for, I think was also beneficial in his journey. And I'm hoping I can share that as well with other people, to again dissect it down into a language that you can understand, and not in that scientific or medical speak.
Yep.
That it's in layman's terms, how to understand what someone's going through.
On the business owner level, obviously we endure a shitload of pressure and risk and stress just running and growing a business. I think after your talk, I did a bit more reading up around this, and you let me, and thank you for letting me talk about this in my weekly leadership email. But some of the reading I did around that as well, business owners are more than double likely to be, suffering mental health issues because of all the pressure we choose to put ourselves under of running a business. So, and again, I also think we're a little bit more stoic than non-business owners in the sense, because we feel highly responsible to make sure this shit show doesn't collapse, So it's as important for the owners of businesses to make sure that they've got their own support in place. And often I've found, just talking with other business owners, when you're going through those hard times, it's some of the most powerful ways to navigate it.
Absolutely. In my talks, and another service that I do in my business is giving, sort of 1 hour, 90-minute workshops, and keeping it again in a bite-sized way where I'm not going to lose the attention of the room, hopefully, and to go into some of these things. And it's really important for people, I think, to have that epiphany and that aha moment to go, oh, yeah, I understand what you're talking about now, and now I want to know more, and start to put your mind into the psychology space of how people operate and how your workplaces operate and all that sort of stuff. But a point I'm trying to make is that it's like the safety demonstration on an airplane. If we all remember what happens on airplanes, it's been a while for most of us. But it's
mask on first.
Yeah, exactly. Put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others. So for leaders, we need to ensure that we know when our cup is full. We need to have our own mechanisms and our own support systems, and we need to know and understand ourselves. So you almost need to work on yourself first before you can help others. And I think that's what's really powerful in a course such as Mental Health First Aid, where you're learning about science and symptoms and things about depression, anxiety, and substance misuse. And you see a lot of light bulbs go off where someone goes, oh, that's me. The things you're talking about, oh, that's me. And being able to understand yourself better and know that it's completely normal for you to be having those sorts of feelings and emotions and thoughts. You can then maybe seek treatment or guidance for yourself, and then you're able to help others. That's a really important part for leaders, to know when your cup is full and to know what your support networks are.
Yeah, definitely. I regret not doing more around. I had one work episode where the manager that I had to move on, we're all worried about this person, and in hindsight I probably could have done more, but unfortunately didn't realize it was as severe as it was. They ended up committing suicide after they were let go, which was really, really sad. And I think there's a couple of people in the room that night spoke about similar incidents of suicide after letting people go. So it's a treacherous and tricky road to have to navigate with managing people with mental health. But unless you go out and get the support to know how to handle these situations and guide people to the right resources, then you're just being complacent.
That's right. And in those sort of circumstances, it's so difficult not to put blame or have guilt that you didn't do something else or something more, but you can only do what you know. And if we can all learn just that little bit more, we may have a chance to help someone and maybe save someone. But ultimately, I guess there are so many so many parts to someone's mental health and illness that it's probably not just the one thing. And that was, you know what I mean? In that specific example, it was probably a number of things, and that was the last straw. And then, but then that guilt and that blame often will fall to you, and that can be unfair in that circumstance.
What's one thing you think small business owners do really poorly in this area?
I think just give it time, like actually assign some time to educate themselves in this space. And once you educate, you can empathize rather than sympathize. Like if you think you know stuff, until you've really understood it and educated yourself on it. And that can be as simple as listening to a few podcasts and listening to people's stories and case studies. And there's some great things out there. Like there's a whole section, I think on Spotify, on health and wellbeing.
Yep.
Pick out a couple that speak to you. Joe Rogan podcast, he talks a lot about mental health and illness, and a lot of his guests, famous people that we think have it all, really can break down a lot of those stigmas. And that's another thing in the Productivity Commission report, is that stigma is still one of the biggest barriers to us getting better at mental health in this country. So just by breaking down your own stigmas and stereotypes in your mind can help educate yourself. So I think that's what small business owners, we are very time poor, but spend an hour a week, half an hour when you go for a walk, when you're trying to do your self-care stuff, just maybe put on one podcast or watch one documentary or watch a TED talk, or there's so many easy things out there. But then once you started that journey, assign some time to do a mental health first aid course. There's some great stuff with Lifeline at the moment. They're doing free courses. There's like a 3-hour accidental counsellor course that's online, really easy, really approachable information, and that can be found on the Tasmanian Lifeline website. There are so many ways of bite-sized pieces. You don't need to go out and do a whole psychology degree like I did, because that's mad. But you can really start to learn just by checking out what's out there.
Yeah, I hadn't heard the mental health first aid certificate you mentioned in your talk before. I went and read up, and I think that's a wonderful place just to start. We'll link through to that in the show notes. I've got a couple other stats here from that weekly leadership email I sent, that from the studies that you sent me. Mental ill health and suicide costs $220 billion a year in Australia, which is $600 million a year, and approximately $39 billion a year of lost productivity. So this is a huge, huge area. In any context.
Absolutely. Massive.
Jump over to growasmallbusiness.com and leave your details to get a short 2-minute email I send on Fridays to help small business owners like you become better leaders. I include some reading or professional development resources I've discovered in the last week. And do you have some professional development resources you'd recommend, books, podcasts, or online courses? Obviously linked through to your own website, but any other ones?
There's sometimes some really great stuff with the Tasmanian Chamber of Commerce. They do an emotional intelligence. You can find some really great stuff. There's a neuro leadership stuff online as well. Obviously, mental health first aid is I think the gold star that every workplace should have. Their key managers and leaders do that course. Podcasts, there's some All in the Mind, conversational pieces like The Imperfects. It's got by the guy that does the Resilience Project. That's a really great book, Resilience Project. Some of my favorites are The Body Keeps the Score, Lost Connections, The Happiness Project. The Happiness Trap. There are so many really great books out there. You just need to go to that self-help, and that's the thing that's annoying, is that that self-help moniker is often dismissed, and you think, oh, it's all hoo-ha stuff and airy fairy sort of things, but some of it can be really, really powerful. I guess it's just, there's a lot of organizations that do some great stuff, and there are a lot of really great free resources. So Beyond Blue, they have these amazing booklets on depression and anxiety and what you can do. If you want to know more, get in touch with places like the Black Dog Institute. look up some of their research. You can gain a lot just from reading pieces of research and studies out there. The Productivity Commission report, have a read of the mental health section in Workplace. There's a huge section. It's a worthwhile read. What else? I'm trying to work on a page on my website for all this sort of stuff too, to collate it all.
Yeah.
And the headsup.org.au, they're mentally healthy. So there's 9 attributes to a mentally healthy workplace. You can also sign up to get a really great PDF. It's like 60 something pages of how you actually implement that in your workplace. So 9 dot points. It goes really, and then this document goes into depth. And then you can sign up for a 6-week newsletter where it'll help guide you through how to implement those. And spending the time on that, I think it would be really beneficial for a lot of people that have no idea where to start. I also found a resource on the Queensland government website, which I'm working on this page on my website, so keep posted. Queensland government have a really great template on how to write a mental health policy. It's very involved. There's a lot to it, but a great guide if that's something you want to have in writing, which I highly recommend to do so, particularly for your larger organisations.
Great. We'll link through to all that in the show notes. Right, Bianca, one of our final few questions. What do you think is the hardest thing when it comes to good mental health in the workplace for a small business?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think the hardest thing is understanding and having the patience yourself as the person that needs to implement, is that it takes a lot of time and effort, and that it is case by case. You can't have this blanket, and that's why mental health policies are hard, because you can't have a blanket approach. You might have someone with severe depression, or you might have someone in psychosis. You might have someone just with a bit of anxiety that it is impacting their work capabilities. It really is difficult because it is so individual, and having the time and patience to deal with that is, I think, the biggest challenge.
Finally, my favourite question. What is the one thing you'd say to a small business owner starting out in their growth journey on day one?
I think in general, prioritize yourself and your relationships. Don't make it about making money. Don't make it about you want to win all these awards or be successful or whatever. Just focus on relationships. 100%. That's your main goal, is to make genuine connections, have genuine and authentic relationships with people. That is across the board, your employees, your business partners, your suppliers, your everything, your customers, of course. But in that whole ecosystem of a business, work on those relationships.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before on the cast, that the longest running study on happiness, it's a Harvard study going for nearly 80 years now, I think. And from that, they surmise that the key to happiness is relationships. It's not money. And yeah, it's a wonderful study if anyone wants to look it up.
I think that was one of the best pieces of advice I had been given, was by our previous employers and business partners, that they had said, what if this place burns down, what have you got? You've got each other. And that was in relation to mine and James's relationship. And that's the most important thing, that if the business burns down, you've only got each other. So that's the most important thing you need to be mindful of and work on. I think in terms of day one for a small business owner, for the mental health journey, is to be patient and to not discount the small bits of information will contribute to the big picture. So learning the little tidbits will all contribute, and just try to break down your stigmas and take the time to educate yourself.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bianca, for your time today and what you shared with us and what you're doing out there to help other business owners and the team members in general around this very important and under-resourced area.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the opportunity, Troy.
And for our audience, we would greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.